Hello everyone, this is Akash Chauhan, and in today's lecture we will continue with internet addressing. But this would be part one of this lecture. Okay, I'll discuss the internet addressing. Whatever we would be able to cover in this lecture, we'll cover in this part second. Okay, this would be the lecture 5. So in this lecture, we will focus upon what is internal and private IP address. We have used these terms private IP address, public IP address, and as well and net as well. Okay, so we'll focus on these terms. We will explore all these things. There is a new topic which we will cover. This is the IPv4 and IPv6. These are the ways to write IP addresses of a device, but we will look into detail what is the significance of these IP addresses. Okay, and where do we use IPv4 and where do we use IPv6? And this is what to say. This lecture I'm making to cover the basics of networking flow. Whenever we talk about client and server, and there is a networking or communication between client and server using socket programming, then these terms will always be used. So you guys should always be aware about all these basic terms. What is a private IP address? What is a public IP address? What is NAT? What is IPv4 and what is IPv6? Okay, so in that case, let's continue with our lecture. So let's discuss about NAT and all these private and public IP first of all. Then I'll move to this topic. Okay, what is IPv4 and what is IPv6? Okay, so let's look at this structure. We have different devices in our home. Let's say we have laptop, we usually have phone, we have a printer in some cases. If we do have different different devices, and we have a common network in our home. Let's say you have a Wi-Fi installed in your home, and your ISP is the internet service provider is, let's say, Geo in that case. Okay, so it means your ISP is Geo, your ISP is Geo or Airtel. Let's say in our case it is Geo, and all your devices are connected to this network. And this network, this ISP, is providing you the access of the internet, right? So if this ISP is providing you the internet, it means it should also be connected with the internet. Okay. So in order to connect with the internet, we use a net router. So what is net? Net stands for network address translation. Okay. Or the translator. So what is the use of network address translation? As the name suggests, that it is translating the network address. It means some addresses are coming from the internet and it is converting those addresses into something else. And it is getting some addresses from the private network and it is converting those addresses into something else. So this is the job of a net router, to convert the private IP addresses. This is private and this is public. Okay, so net router job is to convert the private IP addresses into public and public to private. Okay, this is the job of net. And why do we first of all need all these private and public IP addresses? We will see why. But let's understand the mechanism which is usually followed by the ISP or the internet service provider. Okay, so in that case, this net router, if it is having private IP addresses and the public IP addresses, it means the net router would be having two IP addresses. One IP address would be for this network. Okay, this is the local network, I would say. This is the local network, and this is actually the internet. So this IP2 is used as an external IP address. Okay, it means if net is connected with two network, this is the local area network and this is the internet. It means, for example, what could be the local area network? Let's first understand that GHU network. Sometimes you use LAN, right? Or sometimes you use Wi-Fi of the university, right? It means all the computers in the university, including your phone, if you are connected with the Wi-Fi, they all are somehow connected with the same ISP. So whoever would be providing the network in the university, your all devices, including all the LAN computers, all would be connected to the same ISP network. And it is the responsibility of the net of your university. Let's say in that case, this would be GEHU net router. So it is the responsibility of the net router to distribute unique IP addresses over this network to each and every devices. Okay, so if why it is having this constraint over the devices connected to this net, or having all the devices over this network have and assign a unique IP address, because then it is the responsibility of net to identify which is the device having what type of IP address. For example, if a request is coming from the outside world, it would this would be the responsibility of the net router to send that particular request to that particular machine only, right? So in order to do that, all the devices connected in this local network would be unique, and it is the responsibility of the net to figure out how to do that. So it provides you a particular private IP for that particular machine. Okay, so in that case, all the machines have unique internet IP addresses over the network. It means if this is the local network of GHU, let's say this one, okay, this is the local network. It means all the devices connected in this network would be having unique IP addresses. This is called the internal IP address or private IP address. But let's say uh, all the devices D1, D2, D3 like this would share same external IP address over the same local network. It means all these IP addresses would be sharing same external IP address for the internet. Okay, why? Because over the internet, all these IP addresses shouldn't be there. Okay, only the IP of this net address should be there, or this local network router would be there. So it then it would become the responsibility of the router to distribute a particular data to a particular machine. But for the internet, it is not required to know all these IP addresses. So in that case, all the devices over this network, let's say all the computers, all the phones, all the printers in our university can share a single external IP address or the public IP address of the internet, because we have the net router in our university, and this is the general scenario of the network communication. Okay, we will see why this complex mechanism is there, but first you understand the working of this mechanism. So in that case, in this case, IP2 would be the external IP address shared among all the devices over the same local network. It means IP2 would become the the public IP address for all these devices. So if anyone from the internet wants to communicate with this device, they would definitely use okay, this public IP address or the external IP address with some information of this client, so that when your request reaches to NAT, it would know, okay, you have used this external IP address or the public IP address of this network and this particular computer you have chosen. So it will send that data to that particular machine. So it would become the responsibility of the NAT. Okay, so this is the overall working of the net in the internal and external or private or public IP addresses. So the question is, first let's understand how to get uh, these IP addresses, how to get this external IP address and how to get this particular public IP address. Because as far as we understood, we know that this would be assigned to this particular machine and this would be assigned to this particular ISP. Okay, I hope this is clear. This would be B and this is A. So A is to assign this IP address would be assigned to a particular machine, and B would be the public IP address for your ISP network, right? So how to get this external IP or the public IP address, and how to get this private IP address? So there are ways. So I'm using Mac. So I'll give you the possible ways, okay, to know how to know your external or internal IP address. So how to get this external IP address of your local machine? We are interested in to know what is this IP2. IP2 would be the ISP IP address. If you are using Geo, it would depend on your local area network, okay? That whatsoever the router of the Geo would be nearest to you, or the net router would be nearest to you, that public address would be of that particular net router, okay? So you can open the Google, okay, and you simply write this, what is my IP? So it would return you your the IP of your ISP, because you have the internet. So it will find your ISP IP address, or this IP2 external IP address. If you simply run this, if you simply search what is my IP address, it would return you something like that, okay? If you want to use, if you want to use a particular site to know, then this is that particular site in which you write ipecho.net and then slash plain. It will also return you the same IP address. If you want to know through your IP, then you simply write this in your terminal. This is curl, curl. You are meant to write something, some URL. So if you notice here, this is the URL, okay? And then you type this semicolon and then write echo, and this will also return you, this is over your machine. So I'm using Mac, so all, you know um, the Windows, it could be different, but at least try this on. This is working on Mac. I have tried by myself. So these are three ways to know your external IP address, or this IP2, or the IP address of your ISP, okay? Which would be common for all your devices, okay, if you having the same ISP. How to get the internal IP address? So as you know, if you are using GHU ISP or the Geo ISP, these addresses would be different. Why? Let's say if you are using a GHU LAN Wi-Fi, okay, then it would become the responsibility of the net router of GHU to assign you a particular IP address according to the mechanism of that particular net router. If you are using the ISP of Geo or the Airtel, then they will also perform the same mechanism, yet they can provide you the different IP addresses. But definitely in that local area network, those IP addresses would always be unique, because it would be the job of the net router to provide you the data. If you if the ISP wouldn't be able to find you unique in the local area network, then how they would send you or get the data from you? This would be a difficult task, right? So to get this internal IP addresses, these are, first of all, you must understand, these are not static IP addresses, okay? Whenever you connect to a network, your network provider, your internet service provider would provide you a particular private IP address, okay? They may differ. So how to get that? So there is a way. In Mac, you open the terminal, you simply type ifconfig, and you check this en0, and inside inet, you can find this internal IP address. I'm not showing you this because sometimes it is not good to tell your internal IP address or your public IP addresses. So that is why I'm not running this command, okay? Because all these lectures would be public and I don't want to be hacked, okay? So for worst case scenario, so it is like that. If you want to check, then in a simple way without using terminal, then you go to the system preferences. This is actually for Mac. If you are using Windows, there would be, you just simply go to the your computer, check the network, go Wi-Fi, and there would be IPv4, and then you have to take this address from there, and this is your private IP address. So why we have talked all these things? Definitely, if they are not useful to us, then what is the point of having this lecture? But we wanted to reach to this point. This point, we are interested in this IP address. Why? Because if all the devices in this local network, let's say I have a ISP of Geo or GHU ISP, okay, let's say either one is okay. If you're having a Geo ISP, internet service provider, then as you know, all the devices in your local network would have assigned a unique IP address. That is clear. That would be assigned by the ISP. So why you want to use the net instead of local network to communicate with all these devices? It would be super easy, right? If you know the IP address of other devices, then you can use this local network only without going to the internet, okay? And then you can communicate with each other. So we are interested in this type of communication. We are interested in this type of communication where all the devices are connected with each other, because to know the private IP address, it is easy for your net router to let you know what are the private IP addresses of all the devices connected with a local network. Or you may sit in the library or the lab to, and you sit on different computers, so you would know the different IP addresses of all those computers. So it is super easy. But to know the IP address of a person over the internet, okay, if you want to know the IP address of a person of the internet, the net router is not enough to do so. Okay, so that is why you are not supposed to share your public or private IP address with anybody or internet. Okay, because it is, these are actually the virtual addresses. If you can see, these are provided by the net router, but this particular internet IP address would always be there on internet. Okay, so to sharing this with this net router, it is quite internal process. Okay, and even if you know that this IP address for this local network, nobody would be able to harm your computer until unless they know how to reach your computer from that net router, because this ISP is available over the internet. Okay, so let's come to the point that we are interested in all these IP addresses over a local network so that we can communicate with each other using the local network without going to the internet, because internet is being used to communicate with outside world, not internal local network. So we don't go to the internet, yet we need a network. Okay, so it means uh, it is very important for us to know all these private IP addresses. So if I know this, I can ping this user, I can communicate with that, and that will be used in our two-way communication or one-way communication, in which if we talk about one-way communication or two-way communication, we will definitely use these IP, sorry, these private IP addresses. Okay, in that communication we will use, because if we know the private IP address of the machine, then in that particular local network, we can use the IP of this, and we can send the data from here to here, right? If I know this private IP, because this is assigned by the ISP, and an ISP can trust you because you are the part of this local network, so it is okay to know the IP address of the other device, which is very easy to figure out. Okay, so you can communicate with that particular device. Okay, if you know the private IP address. So this is all about private IP, public IP, and net. But first of all, I would give you, let's say, I would want to ask you a question. Wouldn't there be a simple way to figure out a particular unique machine, why we are using it, so many things, private, public, net, and all? Wouldn't there be a particular, let's say if my computer has assigned one, no other person in the world would assign this number, then definitely over the internet or over the local network, if somebody knows this is me, okay, this number you just fix for my device. If you fix this number for my device, then you don't need to assign this number to anybody else, and the rest of the numbers you can assign. So you can figure out myself, or you can find myself as unique when you know this is my number. Why haven't we gone through this? Why this process is not there? This simple questions should come into your mind. Why we are using such a complex process? Okay, why we are not assigning all the computers in the world, all the devices in the world a unique number? We have huge number. We can assign number as as many as we can. Okay, and why we are not doing that? It is a restriction with this particular addressing. So since long we are using this IPv4 mechanism, and if we talk about IPv4, there are some restrictions with that. I'll discuss with you later on, and with the time you will figure out the solution of that issue is IPv6. So if we are using IPv4 IP address, then we cannot do this. Okay, if we are using IPv6 addressing, then we can definitely do that. So this thing is simply if we can assign a unique number to a device, and we will not assign that number to any other device in the world, then also that device would also be uniquely identified, right? This is very simple. Why we are going through all these internal, external on net? Okay, in order to do that, let's understand the structure of IPv4 first of all, so that we can understand what are those limitations that are restricting us not to build this type of a model. Okay, what are those restrictions? Okay, so let me come to that point.